The flashing police lights illuminated my willow brick driveway, casting stark shadows over my son Noah's wrecked car. Deep scratches crisscrossed the paint, dents scarred the hood, and the words, "Spoiled brat," blazed in red spray paint across the sides. Shattered glass from 2 broken windows glittered on the ground. Noah, just 17, stood motionless, his face drained of color, staring at the car he'd worked so hard to earn. Our security footage revealed the shocking truth: my niece, Clara, and an unfamiliar girl, laughing as they vandalized it. How did my family unravel to this point? It began 25 years ago in Stonebridge, when I, Sarah, an 18-year-old fresh out of high school, took in my cousin Rachel's abandoned son, Ethan, as my own. Rachel, now 47, gave birth to Ethan at 22. From the outset, she and her then-boyfriend, now husband Mark, showed no interest in him. They acted as if he didn't exist, leaving him with whoever was available while they partied, rarely checking in. I'd returned from Stonebridge High to find Ethan in a soiled diaper, unchanged for hours. After weeks of neglect, I couldn't stand it. Though young and scared, I stepped up because no one else would. I took on most of Ethan's care. My great-aunt Agnes, bless her, watched him while I finished my senior year in Hillview. In return, I cleaned her home and cooked on weekends. It wasn't perfect, but we managed. My parents, Robert and Linda, gave me a mere $100 a month for Ethan. Barely enough for formula, let alone diapers, clothes, or doctor visits. Great-aunt Agnes and I were the only ones who truly cared. I skipped senior prom, unable to afford both a dress and Ethan's formula, a choice that shaped those early years. A year after graduating, things took a darker turn. My parents decided they were done with us. I came home to our Brookdale house to find my belongings stuffed in garbage bags by the door. Rachel bluntly said she wished she'd never had Ethan. Who says that about their own child? His confused little face, looking up at me, still lingers in my memory. Great-aunt Agnes and I consulted a family law attorney in Fairmont. Rachel and Mark signed away their parental rights without a second thought, as if discarding an old piece of furniture. At 19, I gained full custody of Ethan. We moved to Great-aunt Agnes's home in Pinewood. She cared for Ethan while I attended Bayside Community College and worked part-time at a grueling retail job that paid barely above minimum wage. The manager pushed for extra shifts, but I balanced studying and raising Ethan. Exhausted, I'd fall asleep at the kitchen table, drooling on textbooks. It was incredibly tough, especially after Great-aunt Agnes passed away when Ethan was 6. Those first weeks without her were a blur of grief and fear. She left me her modest 2-bedroom home in Willowbrook, giving us stability. Suddenly, Rachel and my parents wanted to reconnect, eyeing the inheritance. I set firm boundaries: respect us or stay away. Robert made an effort, and we're now close. He helps with my kids and calls regularly. Linda and I rarely speak, but she's civil to Ethan during infrequent visits. Around this time, I met my husband, David, at Bayside Community College. He took night classes while working days. We connected instantly, but I was cautious about introducing him to Ethan, not wanting Ethan to bond with someone who might leave. After a year of dating, I let them meet. I was so nervous I could barely eat that day. They bonded immediately. David, wonderful with kids, treated Ethan with care, playing video games for hours and reading bedtime stories with unique voices for each character. Small gestures that meant the world to Ethan. Hello. Thanks for watching and being part of this journey. If you enjoy story like this, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support means the world. Now let's dive into the story. When Ethan was 8, both Rachel and I were pregnant. I found out first, and a month later, Robert mentioned Rachel was expecting. Suddenly, Rachel wanted Ethan back in her life, calling to see him. I hoped her pregnancy had sparked some remorse, thinking it might benefit Ethan to know his birth mother. I was mistaken. She told him David and I wouldn't love him once our real baby arrived, saying things like, "They'll have their actual son soon, so they won't want you anymore," or, "When their real son is born, you'll see how they treat him differently." It was heartless. We only learned this when Ethan broke down, sobbing, begging us not to abandon him. When he shared Rachel and Mark's words, I was livid. Ethan knows he's not my biological son but is my son in every way that matters. We've always been open about his origins, emphasizing he's loved and wanted. I cut contact with Rachel and Mark again. We pursued family therapy and individual sessions for Ethan. The therapist noted that some children internalize rejection from birth parents, so we worked to ensure Ethan knew he wasn't to blame. When I gave birth to Noah, my first biological child, it was odd to think of it that way. I made sure Ethan felt just as loved. The early months with a newborn and an 8-year-old were exhausting. Recovering from a C-section and breastfeeding around the clock, I strove to include Ethan. David took time off work, and Robert took Ethan to the park or movies for special outings. Ethan was gentle and protective with Noah from the start. A few years later, Rachel reached out via a long email, claiming she'd been wrong and wanted to make amends. Skeptical, I discussed it with David and Ethan. We opted for low contact, seeing them at family events and occasionally letting Rachel's daughter, Clara, spend time with my kids. I never left Ethan alone with Rachel and always checked in with him afterward to ensure he was okay. Over the years, David and I built a stable life. He earned his degree and landed a solid job in his field, and I became a licensed nurse. We bought a larger home in Willowbrick, in a nice neighborhood with good schools. We live comfortably, while Rachel and Mark struggle financially, often between jobs or facing crises. Mark works briefly, then quits, complaining about the atmosphere. They've been evicted 4 times in the past decade. My kids enjoy extracurricular activities. Ethan played soccer for years and now participates in the debate club. Noah is passionate about basketball and computer programming. They receive thoughtful gifts for Christmas, birthdays, and we take a big family trip every summer. Last year, we rented a lakefront house in Riverton for 2 weeks. Rachel and Mark can't afford such things, so Clara misses out on activities and trips. I feel for her. It's not her fault her parents are the way they are. When Clara was around 9, Rachel started suggesting I pay for her expenses. First small things like school supplies or shoes, then escalating to dance classes, summer camp, and a new phone. I told her that wasn't my responsibility. I gave Clara nice gifts for her birthday, Christmas, and sometimes took her shopping or to the movies, but I didn't treat her the same as my own kids. Why would I? Once, Rachel called, asking me to pay for Clara's school pictures because she forgot it was picture day and didn't have the money. I sent $30 for the basic package, only to learn later she used it to buy cigarettes. Clara didn't get her pictures. After that, I started buying things directly for Clara instead of giving money to Rachel. For a few years, things were relatively calm. We'd see Rachel's family at family gatherings, exchange pleasantries, and go our separate ways. Clara would come over sometimes and hang out with my boys, playing video games or watching movies. It seemed fine, with only occasional tension when Rachel made snide comments about our house or car. When Noah turned 17, David and I were discussing getting him a cheap starter car, just like we did for Ethan when he turned 17, a used Toyota with decent mileage and good safety ratings. Ethan had to contribute some of his own money from his part-time job and is responsible for gas and helping with insurance, which has been a good lesson in responsibility. Clara was also turning 17 around the same time, and Rachel apparently told her she was getting a car too. The problem was, Rachel couldn't afford to buy her a car, so she called me out of the blue and said, "Clara's birthday is coming up, and she's expecting a car like her cousins got. I was thinking you could handle that since you guys have so much money." I was stunned. I told her I wasn't going to buy her daughter a car. I didn't promise one, and it's not my responsibility. Rachel got mad, accusing me of thinking I'm better than her, claiming I've always been the favorite and that it's unfair Clara has to suffer because they're not as fancy as us. I told her maybe if she or Mark held down a job for more than 6 months, they could afford things for their daughter. It was a low blow, but I was furious. Rachel didn't talk to me for a while, which was honestly a relief. I thought maybe she'd dropped the whole car thing and was figuring out an alternative for Clara. Maybe a payment plan or helping her get a job to save up, like responsible parents do. But that would be too reasonable for Rachel. Then came Noah's 17th birthday. We surprised him with the car, and he was ecstatic, jumping up and down, hugging everyone. It was a joyful moment. A couple of days later, Clara called me, screaming and crying, asking why I hated her and couldn't treat her the same as her brother, meaning Ethan. She said she'd been telling all her friends she was getting a car for her birthday, and now she was going to look like a liar, and it was all my fault. I tried to stay calm, explaining that things are different. Ethan is my son, and she is my niece. I'm her aunt, and my role is to provide birthday and Christmas presents and show up when it matters. Then I said something harsh, that Ethan, her cousin, will always be more important to me than she'll ever be. As soon as the words left my mouth, I knew they sounded cruel, but they were true. Ethan is my son. I've raised him since he was a baby, through every fever, nightmare, heartbreak, and triumph. Of course, he means more to me than Clara, whom I see a few times a year. That's just how it is. She started yelling again, saying I'm unfair, and hung up. Rachel called to berate me, saying I was playing favorites and it wasn't fair to Clara. I told her if she hadn't promised a car to her daughter or relied on my money, none of this would have happened. I said maybe she should try being a parent instead of expecting everyone else to provide for her kid. It's been a couple of days, and I'm getting calls and texts from some family members and Rachel's friends, calling me cruel and worse. My Aunt Margaret, Linda's sister, called and said I should be ashamed of myself for not helping family in need. I wanted to ask where she was when I was 18, taking care of a baby that wasn't mine, but I just hung up instead. I do feel bad because my kids grew up with more, and maybe I could have helped more, but a car is a huge expense, and Clara hasn't done anything to earn it. My boys maintain good grades, did chores, and have part-time jobs. They've shown responsibility. Clara barely passes her classes and has never worked a day in her life, as far as I know. I appreciated the online advice I received, even from those who thought I could have handled things better. To clear up a misunderstanding, I never let Rachel hurt my kids, as some assumed. The low contact was mainly for Clara's benefit. When birthdays or holidays came up, we'd coordinate when I'd pick her up, how long she'd stay, and when I'd drop her off. Rachel has never been to my house or talked to my kids without David or me present. Some asked why I didn't cut contact completely after what happened when Ethan was 8. Honestly, I probably should have, but Robert was trying to keep some semblance of family together, and I felt guilty. Plus, Clara was just a baby then. It wasn't her fault her mom is the way she is. Another reason for keeping a civil relationship with Rachel was that Clara and Noah went to the same school in Meadowvale, so Rachel was at school events like band concerts or basketball games. It would have been awkward to completely ignore her in front of other parents, so we did this strange dance of being polite in public and mostly avoiding each other otherwise. My kids and Clara had a good relationship before this car situation. Noah and Clara were in the same grade and had some classes together. They weren't best friends, but they got along fine. Noah would help Clara with math sometimes because she struggles with it. Clara and Ethan had a friendly relationship too, though there's a bigger age gap, so they weren't as close. I always made sure my kids were happy with how much Rachel was in their lives, which was basically not at all, except for some school events and occasional family gatherings. Ethan, especially, I always checked in with after any interaction with Rachel to make sure he was okay. He's a good kid with a big heart, but he doesn't trust her, and I don't blame him. 2 days after Clara's angry call, I decided to meet her at Green Hollow Park near my house. I thought neutral territory might be better than having her come to my home. It was an unusually warm spring day, and I remember thinking how absurd it was to have this conversation on such a beautiful day. When we met, Clara seemed normal but tired, with dark circles under her eyes, like she hadn't been sleeping well. I bought us both ice cream, probably not the best lunch, but it felt right, and we sat at a picnic table away from others. I told her I didn't mean to hurt her, but she needed to understand it's not my job to buy her a car because I'm not her parent. I tried to be gentle but didn't sugarcoat it. She said she understood but was jealous that Ethan and Noah got everything they wanted. I corrected her on a couple of things. First, Ethan isn't her brother but her cousin. I know biologically they're siblings, but in terms of how they were raised, they're cousins. Second, my boys don't get everything they want. They work for what they get, with good grades, chores, and staying out of trouble. Mostly. There was that time Noah tried to sneak out to a party, but that's another story. I asked what the real reason was for her behavior, since she'd never had a problem before with the differences in our lifestyles. She was quiet for a long time, picking at the wrapper of her ice cream cone, then started crying, saying it wasn't fair that Ethan and Noah get everything while she gets barely anything. She felt Ethan lucked out by being adopted by David and me, and she deserves what my sons have because she's family too, so I should take care of her. I felt bad for her. It's not her fault her parents are unreliable. But I wasn't going to take on responsibility for her like I had for Ethan. That was a different situation, and I was a different person then, young and maybe naive about what I was getting into. I told her that, yes, she's family, but not my child. I love her, but she's not my responsibility. Her parents need to step up and provide for her. If they can't afford a car right now, maybe they could help her get a job to save up or look into other transportation options. She just stared at the ground, not responding. I asked why she felt so strongly about this, why it suddenly became such a big issue when she'd never complained before about the differences in our lives. After a while, she said that, even though her parents take care of her basic needs, she feels like an obligation to them. She's jealous because she thinks we don't see our boys as an obligation. She said, "You're always together, working through problems and helping each other." Even though I kept her in my life and took her out with my family sometimes, she was always jealous that she had to leave while Ethan got to stay. "Sometimes I wish you had taken me too," she said, which broke my heart a little. But what was I supposed to do? Kidnap her as a baby? Her parents never neglected her the way they did Ethan. They're not winning any Parent of the Year awards, but they feed her, clothe her, and keep a roof over her head. I explained that while I understood her feelings, I'm not going to treat her as my kid. I didn't raise her, but I do love her. It's her parents' job to get her a car or help her get one. She got upset again, saying I clearly don't care about her, and left. I sat there for a while, feeling terrible. After I got home, David and I talked about the situation for hours. We decided to call Rachel and tell her my family and I going full no contact. We're done with the drama, the guilt trips, all of it. Rachel asked how I was going to stay in touch with Clara. I said Clara is almost an adult and can contact me if she wants. Then she asked if I was going to get Clara a car, and I said no. I told her it's her job because she's Clara's mother and needs to act like it. Clara needs her to be a mom. Then I hung up and blocked her number. I expected that to be the end of it, at least for a while. But the next day, Linda called, saying I should at least give Clara some money for a car if I won't buy her one. I said no and hung up quickly to avoid a fight. Then I called Robert and explained everything. He agreed with me and said he'd talk to Linda to make her understand, but that didn't go well. Later that week, Robert asked if he could come over. When he arrived, he was visibly upset. Apparently, Linda gave a large chunk of money from their retirement fund to Rachel, which caused a huge fight between them. Robert ended up packing a suitcase and staying at a motel for a bit. I felt terrible. Here I am in my 40s, still causing problems between my parents. Robert insisted it wasn't my fault, that Linda made her choice, but I still felt responsible. I offered to let him stay with us, but he said he needed space to think. So now I'm no contact with Rachel and Linda, and low contact with Clara for the time being. David thinks we should cut ties with everyone except Robert, but I'm not ready to completely write off Clara yet. She's young, still figuring things out, and it's not her fault she was born into this mess of a family. I appreciated all the advice I got. It helped me feel less crazy about this whole situation. A lot has happened since then, and not much of it good. About a week later, I decided to talk to Clara again. I felt bad about how things ended at the park and thought maybe we could find some middle ground. I texted her, asking if she wanted to meet up, and she agreed, which surprised me. We met at my Willowbrick home this time, while everyone else was out, because I wanted us to talk privately. It was a rainy day, and I remember thinking the weather matched the mood, all grey and gloomy. When Clara arrived, she wouldn't look at me, staring at the floor or her phone. I asked if I could give her a hug, and she nodded. The minute I hugged her, she started crying and apologized for how she acted. I told her she didn't need to apologize. I understood she was disappointed and hurt. We sat in the living room with mugs of hot chocolate, and I asked her more about how her parents treat her. She said Mark treats her well and tries to spend time with her, but he's busy working 2 jobs. He drives for a rideshare service in the evenings after his day job, so he's hardly ever home. Rachel is home more but usually keeps to herself and doesn't like to be bothered. Clara said sometimes she'll go a whole day without really talking to either of them, even when they're all home. I asked if Clara feels neglected, and she said no, but they don't have much family time because her parents argue a lot, especially about money. She said sometimes Rachel makes her feel like an obligation, but she knows they love her. It's just that they're always stressed about bills and rent. I asked about the money Linda took from the retirement fund. Clara said she and Rachel were going car shopping soon. I was surprised Rachel told her about where the money came from, but I guess she doesn't see anything wrong with taking from my parents' retirement. I didn't say anything negative about it to Clara, though. That's between Rachel and my parents. Then I brought up her calling Ethan her brother and asked if she really feels that way about him. She admitted she sees him as a cousin and just thought playing the brother card would make me more likely to help her. She explained that, even though they're biologically siblings, they've always been cousins to each other. I asked if she knew how I ended up adopting Ethan, and she said yes. Mark had told her the blunt truth, while Rachel had sugar-coated it. To be clear, Ethan only sees her as a cousin too. To Ethan, his only sibling is Noah. They're super close, always have been. Ethan's protective of Noah but also teases him like any older brother would. I felt like we were making progress, so I offered to pay for therapy for Clara. David agreed when I discussed it with him later, and she said she'd think about it. I also suggested we could do a fun day out together on Saturdays, just the 2 of us, no Noah or Ethan. She got excited about that idea, so that weekend we had our first day out. We went to a restaurant in Riverton she'd been wanting to try, one of those fancy places where they make the food right in front of you. It was expensive, but seeing her smile was worth it. Then we went to a bookstore because she loves reading, and I bought her some books she'd been wanting. She seemed genuinely happy that day, and I thought maybe we had turned a corner. But the following weekend, everything fell apart. Clara and I were supposed to have our second weekend out, but I had to cancel because Noah ended up in the hospital. During basketball practice at Meadowvale, he started wheezing and took his inhaler but didn't wait long enough before continuing. He's had asthma since he was little but usually manages it well. This time, though, he got tackled hard, which knocked the wind out of him and caused a severe asthma attack. This happened on a Friday, and Noah stayed in the hospital until Sunday. It was terrifying. There was a point where his oxygen levels dropped so low they were talking about putting him on a ventilator. Thankfully, it didn't come to that, but I barely left his side the whole time. Clara and I were supposed to go out on Saturday. That morning, I called to cancel, but before I could explain why, she started yelling that I never cared about her and hung up. I was shocked but also dealing with my son in the hospital, so I didn't have the energy to chase after her. I tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted that I was sorry, but Noah was in the hospital, and we could have our day the next weekend. I never heard back from her. I gave up trying to reach her after a couple of days because I was focused on getting Noah back on his feet. Then came the moment that changed everything. 2 days ago, my family and I went out for dinner in Riverton, our first night out since Noah got home from the hospital. About halfway through the meal, our neighbors called, saying they'd called the police because someone was vandalizing one of our cars. When we got home, the police were there. It was Noah's car, scratches all over it, dents where someone had taken something hard to the body, and spray paint saying, "Spoiled brat," on the sides. 2 windows were broken, and glass was everywhere. Noah was devastated. He just stood there, looking at his car, not saying anything. We checked our security footage, thank goodness for those cameras David insisted on installing last year, and could see Clara and some girl I didn't recognize vandalizing the car. They were laughing and taking pictures of themselves doing it. The footage showed they spent almost 20 minutes destroying the car before our neighbor spotted them and called the police. David gave a copy of the video to the police, and Clara and her friend were arrested the next morning. I didn't push for the arrest. That was all the police, once they saw the footage. The damage is estimated at over $5,000, which makes it a felony in our state. Rachel and Linda showed up at our house that afternoon, screaming that I was ruining Clara's life and that if I loved her, I would drop the charges. I tried to explain that it's not up to me anymore. The police are pressing charges based on the evidence. Plus, why should Clara get away with destroying someone else's property? What kind of lesson would that teach her? David is adamant that we don't try to get the charges dropped, and Noah and Ethan agree with him. Noah worked hard to contribute to that car, and now it's ruined. Insurance will cover some of it, but probably not all, and our rates will go up because of this. Not to mention the emotional impact. Noah doesn't feel safe now, knowing his cousin would do something like this. I talked to Ethan about his feelings on all this. He's been quiet through most of the drama, but I wanted to check in with him since Clara is technically his half-sister. He said he's done with everything and thinks it's best to cut contact with everyone, including Clara, because she's just like her mom. He said he's known for years that there's something not right with Rachel, and he sees the same patterns in Clara now. So, we're cutting contact with everyone except Robert. He's been supportive through all of this and agrees that Clara needs to face consequences for her actions. Linda is still defending Rachel and Clara, saying we provoked this by not helping with the car in the first place. It's like being back at square one with my family, and I'm exhausted. I don't know what will happen with the charges against Clara. She's 17, so she'll probably be charged as a minor, but it's still serious. Rachel is threatening to sue us for defamation or something ridiculous, even though there's literal video evidence of what happened.